Now, Luen, I think you may be of the school of thought that releases are mostly a sort of promotional endeavour for everything else that surrounds them. Certainly your mixtapes attract a lot of interest for the artists that are on them and probably help them get people to their shows and so on. From your perspective, do you think that releases are in fact mostly promotional, or there's some other benefit involved there?
Well, I was trying to think about this before because, like, with releasing music as like a new band, I guess it's just the whole, like, everything that you're doing as a whole. If you don't think you're going to make any money off that release, the promo that you do around a new release, even if it's like a free download, is, you know, you might try and contact a whole lot of blogs, and you're gonna put a show on and try and get some new press shots done. And everything that you do as a new artist is basically putting out into the world that you're here and that this is what you sound like, and you're basically putting your new sound across to new people. And then maybe on the second release, that's when you might pick up a label, and that's when you can get a bit more work behind you. But on that first release, I think it's really important for small artists. I don't know if this is too much in the question, but I think it's really important for a new band, or if you're managing a new band or you're booking a new band, to make sure that somebody that first headline show that they do sells out, or like gets close to having lots of people in the room, because a lot of bookers and a lot of labels are gonna take that first show into consideration and really go, oh, how many people can they pull? And even if like no one paid entry, like even if 20 people paid to get into that show and it was all guest list, I think it's really important for new bands to bring all of their friends and family and neighbours into that first gig, so there's a really good vibe in the room, and that bookers can see the potential of that artist selling out that room. They can kind of see for the long run.
I see what you're saying, but I think people may argue against that it's best for bands to maybe just refine their sound, stay out of the spotlight before they've really perfected what they're doing, rather than generating a sort of false hype around the act. And certainly in terms of young bands, perhaps it's best to have output and be actually releasing things rather than fixating on just, you know, the one single that they think is going to have them make it. Do you think that's perhaps a valid counterpoint to what you're saying?
Well, I don't think you should try and sell out a room until you've got your sound down pat. So obviously you'd play a heap of shows. But if you're releasing an EP, I think it's important to have a really solid room in front of you. If it's your first single, or if it's an EP or like a mixtape that is free to download on Bandcamp, then it's probably going to be like a smaller venue, or maybe like a club night. You've joined a like a bill on a club night, and then it's not so important to try and create like a artificial hype. But if you're releasing an official release and you're really putting a lot of work behind it and you want to get attention, then I think it's important to put everything you can behind it, if that includes, like from my party background, putting up posters and making sure you invite all your friends to that first event and making sure that everybody knows that it's on. Like, you probably don't even have to create artificial hype, more just make sure that everyone knows that you're playing, because I know a lot of artists are quite like shy with their parties. They don't want to tell all their friends to come, and they are pretty quiet about it. And people probably would pay, like, people do pay entry to your show, like if they're your friends. You don't have to put them on the door. But when you start, really, you should really refine your sound. And I do take that back. You shouldn't just have like a big gig as your first show if you don't know how to use Ableton. You
could embarrass yourself. It could be horrific. It could be the worst gig anyone's ever seen.
Yeah, exactly. But
Lorrae, I imagine you've got an interesting perspective on this, because I can't help but feel that the acts you're working with closely at the moment, Courtney Barnett, Teeth and Tongue, King Gizzard, are all acts that are currently hypey, but they've sort of gone the long road to get there. You know, They haven't been immediately hypey from their first shows. They've written a lot of songs, they've played a lot of shows, and now certainly 2 out of those 3 are doing really well overseas.
I think hype only lasts so long, so you need to set yourself up. I would say build it and they will come. So put all of your time into perfecting your art and your music, your live show, whatever it is you want to get to people, make sure that is perfect. And if that means playing gigs to 2 people to start off with, that's fine. Just, play as many gigs as you can, get out there. I would say rather than try and sell out your very first show, go and support another band that has played for years and built their way out. Like King Gizzard played to like 0 people for their first few years. It took a long time to get where they are now, and it doesn't happen overnight. For some people it might, but it doesn't usually.
I think the interesting thing with them is that they've released 4 albums in 2 years or something.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes against the grain of bands having to make an impact immediately. Nowadays, because there's so much music being released on so many different platforms, people can only listen to so much, etc. You might be exposed to a band after they've released 6, 7, 8 albums sometimes, and then get back into their back catalogue that way, whereas perhaps that wasn't always the way when people were mostly listening to radio, the internet wasn't such a big thing, and so on. Do you think that perhaps is what's changed things?
I think King Gizzard is a beast all unto its own, and they will do whatever they want whenever they fucking want. So, if they're going to drop 2 albums in the next 6 months, it's going to happen whether or not we want it to, or we have a timeline for them, or whatever. They're going to do whatever they want. So I think it's about finding what works for you, and for every band it's going to be different.
Lewis and Will, from your perspective, and I'm talking about management here, if you have an act that's not quite ready to go, what would your advice be to them? Do you go out and get them to play shows, or do you hold them back and go wait until you're ready?
I think, going out and getting them to play shows and stuff like that's the most important thing. A bunch of the acts that we work with are all, some of them are pretty green. There's one particular that just moved here from the UK who's like quite talented but has no connection to any scene or anything like that, so he doesn't really know what to do or where to go or anything to do. So it's just, with him, it's just about getting him to play shows, because then it means that he meets, there's 3 people playing that night, and he meets 2 people or 2 bands, and then he chats to them, and then he talks to their friends and stuff, and then it's like this whole thing. So I think that's, like, if people are just starting out, I don't think the focus should be like, I just want to do, like, put a song on SoundCloud and it get millions of plays on SoundCloud or whatever. They should just be focusing on, like, I want to just do this. If I was like a musician and people were here to watch me play, they would want to do. They should be focusing on that as opposed to having a hit or whatever. And that's definitely what Lorrae was saying about King Gizzard. I'm pretty sure they don't really care about anything other than putting out as many things as they possibly can in the shortest amount of time.
They care about nothing. They care about nothing. They couldn't care what anyone in this room thought about what they were doing. They would do it anyway. I
think that's a good attitude. Well, it's a good attitude if you're really talented, but it's a good attitude to have towards any sort of creative industry. You're only doing this because you want to do it. So you should just do it for that. And then if you get other stuff to do with it, that's good. If you get paid, that's good. But I don't really know where I was going with that.
But Dan, you've only been in this position for a short amount of time, but so far, what's your perspective on this?
Well, Perth in particular, talking about having time to build a sound and all that kind of thing. I've been to Sydney and Melbourne a few times now for, label-related things, and there's a real industry here. Like, I won't mention names, but I was at Good God a while ago, and a girl was playing her first show, and that room wasn't full of punters. It was A&R people. It was crazy. Perth doesn't have that. You can have bands that can play, 50 shows, 100 shows one year and build their sound and not really be noticed or sort of probed or anything like that until they've really developed something. And that's a really good thing, I think. Like, there's a band, Aborted Tortoise, they're called. There's 7 guitarists in that band. They were awful for a year, and now they're dope because they've played a lot of shows and spent the time doing it. So that's what excites me about Perth in particular, being there when I come over here and talk about the West Coast or whatever. But there isn't really an industry like this there. So you find really interesting stuff, hopefully a lot of which I can show you throughout the rest of the year, like things have signed and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's just important to treat, if you're in charge of a label, if you're not willing to treat your audience like they're smart people and as intelligent as you and be into the stuff that you're into, then again, you need to have a think about why you're doing something. Like, I like to think that everybody is ready to appreciate really good music, and it's just showing them it, I suppose. And And Perth's a great place for people to develop their sound like that. So, yeah.